The small town of Pine Ridge sat quietly in the middle of thick forests and rolling hills. It was a place where life moved slowly, and people knew each other by name. The air smelled of pine trees, and the sound of birds chirping filled the mornings. For most residents, life was simple and predictable. But all of that changed one evening when strange lights appeared in the sky. It started just after sunset. Emma Taylor was standing by the riverbank, her camera ready to capture pictures of owls that often came out at night. She had always loved nature and spent hours exploring the woods around Pine Ridge. As she adjusted her lens, she noticed something unusual, a faint glow in the distance. At first, she thought it might be an airplane or a satellite, but the light didn't move like anything she'd seen before. Instead, it hovered for a moment, then descended toward the edge of the forest. Curious and a little uneasy, Emma packed up her gear and decided to investigate. She wasn't the only one who saw the lights. Across town, Jake Monroe was closing up his workshop when he spotted the same eerie glow through his window. Jake was a mechanic who spent most of his days fixing cars and tinkering with old machines. He wasn't easily scared, but there was something about those lights that made him feel uneasy. Grabbing a flashlight, he stepped outside to get a better look. By the time Emma reached the edge of the forest, she could hear strange noises coming from the direction of the lights. They sounded like clicks and hisses, unlike anything she'd ever heard. Her heart raced as she pushed aside some branches and peered into the clearing. What she saw froze her in place. 3 tall, insect-like creatures stood near what looked like a metallic ship. Their bodies shimmered under the moonlight, and their glowing eyes scanned the area with cold precision. Long, sharp claws extended from their hands, and they moved with unsettling speed. Jake arrived moments later, having followed the same path Emma took. When he saw the creatures, he ducked behind a tree, careful not to make a sound. He whispered to Emma, "What are those things?" Emma shook her head, too stunned to answer. Neither of them had ever seen anything like it. The creatures seemed to be inspecting the ground, picking up rocks and plants as if studying them. Then one of them turned its head sharply, as though sensing their presence. For a moment, both Emma and Jake held their breath, afraid to move. The creature tilted its head, scanning the trees where they hid. Just when they thought they'd been spotted, another of the creatures let out a series of sharp clicks. Whatever it said, or signaled, made the first one turn away and walk back toward the ship. Breathing a sigh of relief, Emma and Jake retreated deeper into the woods, putting as much distance between themselves and the strangers as possible. Later that night, word spread quickly through Pine Ridge about the visitors. Some people claimed to have seen the lights, while others dismissed it as a trick of the imagination. But no one could ignore the feeling of unease that settled over the town. The next morning, the creatures emerged again, this time entering the town square. They called themselves the Vrilax and claimed to come in peace. Their leader, a towering figure named Krail, used telepathic communication to speak directly into everyone's minds. He explained that their ship had been damaged and needed repairs, promising that they would leave once their work was done. But Emma and Jake weren't convinced. Something about the Vrilax felt off. Their movements were too calculated, their promises too vague. And when young Sam disappeared near their ship later that day, fear gripped the town. No one knew what the Vrilax truly wanted, but Emma and Jake suspected the worst. These beings weren't here to help. They were hunters, and humans were their prey. The morning after the Vrilax's arrival, Pine Ridge buzzed with a mix of fear and confusion. People gathered in small groups, whispering about what they had seen or heard. Some clung to hope, believing Krail's promise that the aliens meant no harm. Others, like Emma Taylor and Jake Monroe, weren't so sure. They couldn't shake the image of those insect-like creatures with their glowing eyes and sharp claws. Something about them felt wrong, not just strange, but dangerous. Emma spent the early hours walking through town, trying to piece together what was happening. She talked to neighbors, asking if anyone had seen Sam, the boy who had vanished near the Vrilax ship. No one had answers, Only more questions. Where had he gone? Was he still alive? The uncertainty gnawed at her, making it hard to focus. When she passed by the diner, she noticed Lisa Harper sitting alone at a corner table, staring into a cup of coffee. Lisa was a nurse at the local clinic and someone Emma trusted. She decided to sit down and talk to her. "Have you heard anything about Sam?" Emma asked softly. Lisa shook her head, her face pale. "No one knows where he is," Lisa replied. "I went out there last night, near the ship, but I didn't see anything. Just tracks. Strange ones." Emma leaned closer. "What kind of tracks?" Lisa hesitated before answering. "They looked like claw marks, but bigger than any animal I've ever seen, and they led straight back to their ship." Jake, meanwhile, was busy in his workshop. He couldn't stop thinking about the Vrilax and how easily they could move through the forest. If they were truly predators, as he suspected, then the townspeople were sitting ducks. He rummaged through his tools, looking for anything that might help defend against the aliens. A car battery caught his eye, sparking an idea. Maybe he could rig up some kind of weapon. Something loud and bright enough to scare them off. It wasn't much, but it was better than doing nothing. Later that day, Emma and Jake met up outside the general store. Both looked tired but determined. "We need to figure out what they want," Emma said. "If we don't, they'll keep taking people." Jake nodded. "Agreed. But we can't do this alone. We need to get others on board." Together, they came up with a plan. They would go door to door, warning people about the Vrilax and urging them to prepare. Not everyone believed them. Some thought they were overreacting, but a few listened. One of those who joined them was Ryan Fletcher, a former soldier turned park ranger. Ryan had been skeptical at first, but when he heard about Sam's disappearance, he changed his mind. "If they're hunting us, we need to fight back," he said firmly. His military training made him a natural leader, and he quickly took charge of organizing the group. He taught them basic self-defense techniques and showed them how to set traps using materials found around town. As the sun began to set, the group gathered in an old barn on the outskirts of Pine Ridge. It was dark and musty inside, but it offered shelter and privacy. Ryan laid out a map of the area, pointing to key locations. "Their ship is here," he said, marking a spot near the forest. "We should avoid it unless absolutely necessary. For now, our priority is staying hidden and keeping safe." Everyone nodded, though tension hung heavy in the air. Just as the meeting was wrapping up, Mia Collins burst into the barn, breathless and wide-eyed. Mia was only 16, but she was smart and resourceful. She had been experimenting with radio signals in her basement, hoping to pick up news from outside Pine Ridge. "I think I found something," she said, holding up a small device. "Their language. It's not just words. It's patterns, like electromagnetic pulses." Emma frowned. "What does that mean?" Mia explained excitedly. "It means we might be able to disrupt their communication. If we can mess with their signals, we could confuse them or even disable their weapons." Jake's eyes lit up. "That's brilliant," he said. "Let me work on building something. I've got parts in my shop that might help." For the first time since the Vrilax arrived, the group felt a flicker of hope. They were outnumbered and outmatched, but they weren't powerless. With Ryan's leadership, Mia's tech skills, and Jake's ingenuity, they stood a chance. As they left the barn, each person carried a renewed sense of purpose. The Vrilax may have thought humans were easy prey, but they were about to learn otherwise. The night after the meeting in the barn, the Vrilax made their move. Under the cover of darkness, they began hunting. Their glowing eyes pierced through the shadows as they moved silently through the streets of Pine Ridge. The townspeople who had ignored Emma and Jake's warnings quickly realized their mistake. Screams echoed in the distance as families barricaded themselves inside their homes, praying the creatures would pass them by. Emma, Jake, and the others weren't safe either. They had split into smaller groups to spread out and warn more people, but the Vrilax seemed to anticipate their every move. One group barely escaped when a patrol of aliens cornered them near the school. Ryan managed to lead them to safety, but not without close calls. "They're smarter than we thought," he muttered afterward, his voice tight with frustration. "We can't keep running like this." By morning, the town was in chaos. Several people were missing, including 2 members of their own group. The Vrilax didn't leave bodies behind, only eerie claw marks on walls and trees, signs of their relentless pursuit. Fear spread faster than anyone could prepare for it. Some residents fled into the woods, hoping to lose the aliens in the dense forest. Others stayed put, too scared to move or convinced that hiding was their best chance. Emma and Jake decided it was time to act. They couldn't wait around for the Vrilax to pick them off one by one. With Mia's discovery about the electromagnetic pulses still fresh in their minds, they knew they needed a safe place to regroup and plan their next steps. That's when Lisa remembered something important: the old ranger station. "There's a bunker underneath it," she told the group. "It was built years ago for emergencies. If we can get there, we might have a fighting chance." The journey to the ranger station wasn't easy. The group traveled in shifts, sticking to the thickest parts of the forest to avoid detection. At one point, they heard the unmistakable sound of the Vrilax nearby, clicking noises that sent shivers down their spines. Jake held up a hand, signaling everyone to stop. He crouched low, peering through the bushes. 2 of the creatures stood just a few feet away, inspecting the ground where someone had recently walked. Dirt and leaves showed signs of hurried footsteps. "They're tracking us," Ryan whispered grimly. "We need to double back and take a different route." The group nodded and retraced their steps carefully, circling wide around the patrol. It took longer than expected, but eventually they'd reached the ranger station. The building itself was abandoned and falling apart, but the entrance to the bunker was hidden beneath a pile of rotting boards. Ryan cleared the debris while Jake kept watch, his heart pounding with every rustle of leaves. Once inside, they found supplies left over from years ago: canned food, bottled water, flashlights, and even blankets. It wasn't much, but it was enough to give them a temporary refuge. As they settled in, Mia immediately got to work setting up her equipment. She connected wires and adjusted dials, trying to pick up any signals from the Vrilax. Her hands trembled slightly, but her focus never wavered. "If I can decode their patterns, we might be able to jam their communication," she explained. "But I'll need time." Time was something they didn't have much of. Above ground, the Vrilax continued their hunt, growing bolder with each passing hour. They set traps of their own, luring unsuspecting humans into open areas before striking. The survivors in the bunker listened to the distant sounds of destruction, knowing they couldn't stay hidden forever. Sooner or later, they'd have to face the creatures head-on. Jake worked tirelessly on building the device Mia had described, a signal disruptor. Using parts scavenged from his workshop and scraps found in the bunker, he pieced it together bit by bit. Emma helped him, holding tools steady and handing him components. Despite the tension, they shared a brief moment of quiet determination. "We're not going down without a fight," Jake said firmly. Emma nodded. "Not today." As night fell again, the group huddled together, listening to the eerie silence above. The Vrilax were out there, waiting, but so were they. And though fear lingered in the air, something else burned brighter, a spark of defiance. These creatures may have thought humans were prey, but they hadn't counted on humanity's will to survive. Inside the bunker, the survivors worked tirelessly to prepare for what lay ahead. The air was thick with tension, but also with a growing sense of purpose. Each person had a role to play, and they threw themselves into their tasks with determination. Jake focused on finishing the signal disruptor, his hands moving quickly as he soldered wires and adjusted circuits. Beside him, Emma handed him tools and kept watch over Mia, who was hunched over her equipment, trying to decode more of the Vrilax's electromagnetic patterns. Mia's face lit up suddenly. "I think I've got something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Everyone turned to look at her. She pointed to the screen of her makeshift device, where jagged lines pulsed in rhythmic bursts. "These patterns, they're like commands. If we can replicate them or scramble them, we might be able to confuse the Vrilax." Ryan, who had been pacing the room, stopped and leaned closer. "How long will it take?" he asked. Mia hesitated. "A few hours, maybe longer. But if Jake's disruptor works, we could use it to test my theory." While Mia and Jake continued their work, Lisa tended to the group's supplies, organizing food and water so they'd be ready for whatever came next. She wasn't used to this kind of pressure. Her days as a nurse were usually calm and predictable, but she found strength in knowing she was helping keep everyone alive. "We need to stay sharp," she reminded them. "If we fall apart now, all of this is for nothing." As the hours passed, the group began to feel the weight of their situation. They were trapped underground, hunted by creatures that saw them as nothing more than prey. The fear was palpable, but so was their resolve. Ryan called everyone together for a quick meeting. "Listen up," he said, his tone firm but steady. "We can't afford mistakes. Once we're ready, we'll hit them hard and fast. We'll make them regret ever coming here." His words stirred something in the group, a spark of courage amid the fear. Later that night, Jake finally finished assembling the signal disruptor. It was a crude-looking device, cobbled together from spare parts, but it hummed with energy when he powered it on. "Let's see if this thing works," he muttered, holding it up. Mia connected it to her equipment and ran a test. At first, nothing happened. Then, faintly, they heard a low-pitched whine coming from above ground. "It's working," Mia exclaimed, her eyes wide with excitement. "They're reacting to it." The group exchanged glances, hope flickering in their expressions. For the first time since the invasion, they felt like they had a real chance. But their moment of triumph was short-lived. A loud crash echoed from above, followed by the unmistakable sound of claws scraping against metal. The Vrilax had found them. Ryan sprang into action. "Everyone, grab what you can and follow me," he shouted. He led them through a narrow tunnel that branched off from the main bunker. It was dark and cramped, but it offered an escape route. As they moved, the sounds of the Vrilax grew louder, their clicks and hisses reverberating through the walls. "Hurry," Emma urged, glancing back nervously. They emerged into the forest, gasping for breath. The cool night air felt like a gift after the stifling confines of the bunker. But there was no time to rest. Ryan signaled for silence as they crept forward, sticking to the shadows. The Vrilax were close, their glowing eyes scanning the trees. "Stay low," Ryan whispered. "We can lose them if we move carefully." For the next hour, the group played a deadly game of cat and mouse. They used every trick Ryan had taught them, ducking behind rocks, crawling under bushes, and doubling back to throw off their pursuers. It worked, but barely. By the time they reached the edge of the forest, exhaustion weighed heavily on them. Still, they pressed on, driven by one thought: survival. Back in the safety of the trees, they regrouped and assessed their situation. The signal disruptor had proven effective, but it wasn't enough to stop the Vrilax completely. They needed a bigger plan, something bold and unexpected. As they sat in silence, Emma spoke up. "We can't just run forever. We need to fight back, to show them we're not easy prey." Her words hung in the air, sparking agreement among the group. Jake nodded. "She's right. We've got one shot at this. Let's make it count." Together, they began brainstorming ideas, each suggestion building on the last. By dawn, they had a plan. It was risky, but it was their best chance. The Vrilax may have thought humans were weak, but they were about to learn otherwise. The plan was simple but dangerous. It relied on deception, timing, and the element of surprise, qualities the Vrilax hadn't expected from their human prey. Ryan laid it out carefully, using sticks to draw a rough map in the dirt. "We'll split into 2 teams," he explained. One team will act as bait, drawing the Vrilax into a trap. The other will stay hidden and strike when the moment is right. Emma and Jake exchanged glances. They both knew volunteering for the bait team meant putting themselves directly in harm's way, but neither hesitated. "I'll go with the bait team," Emma said firmly. Her knowledge of the forest made her invaluable for leading the Vrilax away from the others. Jake nodded. "I'm coming too. If anything goes wrong, we'll need someone who can fix the disruptor on the spot." Ryan agreed, though his expression showed he didn't like the idea of risking two key members of the group. Still, they were running out of options, and time was not on their side. Maya stayed behind with Lisa and a few others to prepare the second part of the plan. Using the signal disruptor, they would create chaos among the Vrilax ranks once the bait team lured them into position. Mia worked tirelessly, fine-tuning the device, while Lisa gathered materials to set up additional distractions, small fires and noisemakers designed to confuse the aliens further. Meanwhile, Ryan led the rest of the group in setting traps along the path the Vrilax were likely to take. Every step of the plan had to work perfectly. There was no room for error. Early the next morning, Emma and Jake set off with the bait team. They moved cautiously, leaving behind subtle signs, broken branches, footprints, and even scraps of fabric, to ensure the Vrilax would follow. The forest was eerily quiet, the usual sounds of birds and animals replaced by an oppressive stillness. Emma's heart raced as she scanned the trees, half expecting glowing eyes to appear at any moment. Jake kept one hand on the signal disruptor slung over his shoulder, ready to use it if needed. It didn't take long for the Vrilax to pick up their trail. A low clicking sound echoed through the woods, growing louder as the creatures closed in. Emma signaled for the team to keep moving, leading them deeper into the forest. She chose a narrow ravine as the site of the ambush, a natural choke point where the Vrilax would be forced to slow down. As they reached the spot, Jake activated the disruptor, sending out a burst of electromagnetic interference. Above them, the Vrilax paused, their movements faltering as the signal scrambled their coordination. "Now," Ryan's voice crackled over the walkie-talkie. From their hiding spots, the second team sprang into action. Small fires erupted along the ridges, casting flickering light across the ravine. Noisemakers, empty cans filled with rocks, clattered loudly, creating the illusion of a larger force. Confused and disoriented, the Vrilax hesitated, giving the humans a critical advantage. But the victory was short-lived. The aliens quickly adapted, their instincts kicking in as they fanned out to search for the source of the attack. One of the survivors tripped an alarm Ryan had set, drawing attention to their position. Shots rang out as the humans fired makeshift weapons, flares, fireworks, anything that could cause confusion. For a few chaotic moments, it seemed like the plan might actually work. Then Krail appeared, towering above the fray, his glowing eyes locking onto Emma and Jake. "You cannot win," Krail's voice echoed in their minds, cold and mocking. He raised a clawed hand, signaling his warriors to advance. Panic surged through the group, but Ryan shouted orders, keeping everyone focused. "Fall back. Stick to the plan." They retreated in pairs, regrouping at a secondary location deeper in the woods. When the dust settled, the survivors counted their losses. 2 more people were missing, presumed captured or worse. But despite the cost, they had achieved something important. They had shown the Vrilax that humans weren't helpless. Exhausted but determined, the group vowed to keep fighting. The aliens had underestimated them once. They wouldn't make the same mistake again. The survivors regrouped in a hidden clearing, their faces streaked with dirt and sweat. The ambush had been a partial success, but the cost was heavy. 2 members of their group were gone, taken by the Vrilax, and the rest were shaken. Still, there was no time to grieve. They knew the aliens wouldn't stop hunting them, and they needed to strike back before the Vrilax regained their footing. Ryan took charge, his voice steady despite the weight of their losses. "We've shown them we can fight," he said, pacing in front of the group. "But we need to hit them where it hurts. Their ship. If we can sabotage it, we might stand a real chance. Emma nodded, her mind already racing with ideas. If we destroy their ship, they'll have no way to leave. Maybe that'll force them to back off. Jake chimed in, gripping the signal disruptor tightly. Their ship is heavily guarded, but if we use the disruptor to cause chaos, we might be able to sneak inside. Mia added, I can decode more of their signals. If we time it right, we could disable their defenses long enough to get in. Everyone looked at Ryan for final approval. He hesitated, knowing the risks, but ultimately gave a sharp nod. All right, but we do this carefully. No unnecessary risks. They spent the next few hours preparing. Emma and Jake reviewed maps of the area, pinpointing the best route to the ship while avoiding known Vrilax patrols. Mia worked on refining the disruptor's range, ensuring it would cover a wide enough area to confuse the aliens. Lissa gathered medical supplies, packing bandages and antiseptics into a small bag. Just in case, she said quietly, her hands trembling slightly as she rolled up the kit. As night fell, the group set out. The forest was eerily silent, the usual sounds of wildlife replaced by an oppressive stillness. Each step felt heavier than the last, the weight of what lay ahead pressing down on them. When they reached the edge of the trees, the Vrilax ship loomed in the distance, its metallic surface gleaming under the moonlight. It looked impenetrable, a fortress guarding secrets they couldn't yet understand. Mia activated the disruptor, sending out a pulse of interference. Almost immediately, the Vrilax guards outside the ship faltered, their movements jerky and uncoordinated. Now, Ryan whispered sharply. The group moved quickly, sticking to the shadows as they approached the ship. The entrance was guarded, but the confusion caused by the disruptor gave them an opening. Jake threw a flare into the air, drawing the attention of nearby Vrilax warriors. As the creatures turned to investigate, Emma and Ryan slipped through the doorway. Inside, the ship was a maze of twisting corridors and glowing panels. Strange symbols lit up the walls, pulsing in sync with faint hums that vibrated through the floor. This way, Mia urged, pointing to a map she had pieced together from earlier scans. They followed her lead, moving cautiously to avoid detection. At one point, they passed a room filled with glass tubes, each containing a human figure suspended in some kind of liquid. Emma froze, her breath catching in her throat. Is that Sam? She whispered, recognizing the young boy who had disappeared days ago. His eyes were closed, his body motionless. We don't have time to help him now, Ryan said firmly, though his jaw tightened with anger. Our priority is disabling the ship. Reluctantly, Emma nodded, tearing her gaze away from the horrifying sight. They pressed on, finally reaching the core chamber, a massive room dominated by a glowing orb surrounded by intricate machinery. This has to be it, Jake said, examining the controls. If we blow this, the whole ship goes down. Working quickly, Jake rigged explosives using materials they'd brought with them. As he set the timer, the group heard the unmistakable sound of clicking behind them. Krail stood in the doorway, his glowing eyes blazing with fury. You are persistent, he hissed telepathically, but you cannot escape your fate. Ryan stepped forward, blocking the alien leader's path. Try us, he growled. A tense standoff ensued, but Krail didn't attack immediately. Instead, he gestured to his warriors, who began closing in. Go, Ryan shouted to the others. Jake hesitated, unwilling to leave Ryan behind, but Emma grabbed his arm. We have to go. Now. With seconds to spare, they fled the chamber, the timer ticking down behind them. As they burst out of the ship, a deafening explosion rocked the ground, lighting up the night sky. The Vrilax ship collapsed in on itself, flames engulfing its remains. Breathing hard, the group watched from a safe distance, their faces etched with exhaustion and relief. The battle wasn't over, but for the first time, they felt like they had truly fought back. The explosion lit up the night sky, a fiery beacon that marked the end of the Vrilax ship. The survivors stood frozen, their eyes fixed on the burning wreckage as waves of heat rolled over them. For a moment, there was silence. No clicks, no hisses, just the crackling of flames devouring what had once been an impenetrable fortress. Then reality sank in. They had done it. Against all odds, they had struck a blow to their alien predators. But the victory came at a cost. Ryan was still inside the ship when it went up. Jake clenched his fists, staring at the inferno with a mix of anger and grief. "He gave us a chance," Emma said softly, her voice trembling. "We can't let it go to waste." She placed a hand on Jake's shoulder, but he didn't respond. His mind was racing, replaying the moment Ryan had told them to run while he held Krail off. It wasn't supposed to end like this. Mia broke the somber silence. "We need to move, if any of them survived. They'll come after us." Her words snapped everyone back to the present. The group gathered their strength and began retreating into the forest, sticking to the shadows to avoid detection. Despite the destruction of the ship, none of them believed the Vrilax were completely defeated. These creatures were hunters, relentless and cunning. Losing their ship wouldn't stop them. It would only make them angrier. As they moved deeper into the woods, Lissa noticed something strange. A faint hum filled the air, growing louder the farther they walked. "Do you hear that?" she whispered, stopping abruptly. The others froze, listening intently. The sound was unmistakable, a low rhythmic vibration that seemed to come from all directions. Jake frowned. "It's not natural. Could it be another ship?" Emma shook her head. "No, it's too close. And it's different somehow." She glanced around nervously, her instincts telling her they weren't alone. Suddenly, the trees ahead rustled violently, and several figures emerged. They weren't Vrilax, at least not entirely. Their insect-like bodies were scared and damaged, some missing limbs or glowing weakly where their eyes should have been. These aliens looked broken, desperate, but even wounded, they remained dangerous. "They're scattering," Maya realized, her voice barely above a whisper. "They must have been near the ship when it exploded. Now they're trying to regroup." Jake tightened his grip on the signal disruptor. "We can't let them recover. If they find new shelter, they'll rebuild. And next time, we might not get lucky." The group decided to act quickly. Using the remaining supplies, they set traps along the path the injured Vrilax were taking. Simple snares made of rope and branches slowed the creatures down, giving the humans enough time to create diversions. Jake used the disruptor to send out pulses of interference, disorienting the aliens further. Each burst of static bought them precious seconds, allowing them to stay one step ahead. Despite their efforts, the Vrilax fought back fiercely. One of the survivors tripped a trap meant for the aliens, injuring her leg badly. Lysa rushed to help, wrapping the wound tightly to stop the bleeding. "We can't keep this up forever," she muttered, frustration evident in her tone. "They're too many, and we're running out of tricks." Emma knew Lisa was right. They needed a final plan, something decisive enough to end the threat once and for all. As they rested briefly in a hidden grove, she studied the disruptor closely. "What if we overload it?" she suggested suddenly. "If we push it past its limits, it could create a massive pulse, enough to disable every Vrilax in the area." Jake hesitated. "It's risky. If it doesn't work, we'll be defenseless." "But if it does," Mia interjected, "we could finish this tonight." After a tense discussion, they agreed to try. Jake worked furiously to modify the device, increasing its power output while Maya monitored the readings. The hum grew louder, almost deafening, as the disruptor reached critical levels. "Get ready," Jake warned, his hand steady despite the danger. "This is going to be big." When the pulse hit, it was like lightning striking the earth. Every Vrilax within range collapsed, their glowing eyes dimming as their systems failed. The forest fell silent, the oppressive weight of their presence finally lifted. Exhausted but victorious, the group sank to the ground, breathing heavily. They had done the impossible. They had proven that humans weren't prey. But as dawn broke over Pine Ridge, Emma couldn't shake the feeling that their fight wasn't truly over. Somewhere out there, other threats might still exist. For now, though, they had earned a moment of peace and a renewed belief in their ability to survive. The sun rose slowly over Pine Ridge, casting golden light through the trees and chasing away the shadows of the night. The survivors sat in silence, their bodies aching but their spirits lifted by the quiet that now filled the forest. For the first time in days, there were no clicking sounds, no glowing eyes watching from the darkness. The Vrilax were gone, defeated, disabled, or driven into retreat. It was a victory hard won, but it came at a heavy price. Emma looked around at the group, her heart swelling with pride and sorrow. Ryan's sacrifice weighed heavily on all of them, as did the loss of others who had fought bravely alongside them. Lissa tended to the injured woman, her hand steady despite her exhaustion. Jake stared at the disruptor, now useless after its final pulse, his expression unreadable. Mia sat apart from the others, staring at the horizon as if searching for answers in the distance. "We did it," Emma said finally, breaking the silence. Her voice was soft but firm, carrying the note of hope. "They thought we were weak, easy prey, but we proved them wrong." The others nodded, though their faces showed the toll the battle had taken. "It wasn't just us," Jake replied, glancing at the disruptor. "Ryan, Sam, everyone who didn't make it. They're part of this too. We owe it to them to keep going." As the morning wore on, the group began making plans for what came next. The town of Pine Ridge was in ruins, its streets littered with debris and abandoned homes. Rebuilding would take time, effort, and help from outside. Lisa suggested trying to contact authorities again using the radio equipment they'd salvage. If anyone heard Mia's earlier transmission, maybe someone's already on their way, she said hopefully. Mia nodded, her face lighting up slightly. "I'll keep monitoring the signals. There has to be someone out there." While Lisa and Mia worked on the radios, Jake and Emma ventured back toward the wreckage of the Vrilax ship. They needed to gather any useful materials before the site became unsafe. Walking among the charred remains, they found fragments of alien technology, strange metals and glowing crystals that pulsed faintly with energy. "This could be important," Jake said, stuffing some pieces into a bag. "If scientists study this, they might learn how to protect us better next time." Back at camp, the group shared stories of those they had lost, honoring their memory. Each person spoke about Ryan's bravery, Sam's innocence, and the others who had given everything to defend their home. Though grief lingered, so did determination. "We can't let fear control us," Emma said firmly. "What happened here? It changed us. But it also showed us what we're capable of. We survived because we stood together." By midday, a faint crackle came from the radio. Lissa adjusted the dials, her hands trembling with excitement. A distant voice echoed through the static. "This is Rescue Command. Do you copy?" Tears welled up in Mia's eyes as she grabbed the microphone. "We're here. Pine Ridge needs help." The voice responded, clearer now. "Hold your position. Help is on the way." Relief washed over the group, but there was no celebration yet. They knew recovery would be slow, and scars, both visible and invisible, would remain. Still, they allowed themselves a moment of quiet triumph. The Vrilax had underestimated humanity, seeing only weakness. What they hadn't counted on was courage, resilience, and unity. As they waited for rescue, Emma climbed a hill overlooking the town. The view was bittersweet, broken buildings and empty streets, but also signs of life returning. Birds chirped in the distance, and the wind carried the scent of pine. She thought about Ryan's words during their first meeting in the barn. "If they're hunting us, we need to fight back." And they had. Against all odds, they had risen to the challenge. When the rescue team arrived hours later, the survivors greeted them with gratitude but also resolve. Pine Ridge would rebuild, not as it was before, but stronger. The Vrilax had tested humanity, and humanity had endured. Far beyond the stars, Someone might one day hear their story and remember. Even the smallest spark can ignite a fire.